Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Keith from the Solo Gamers Club, and tonight we're diving into a true classic, one of the standout war games of the 1980s, produced by my favorite game company of all time, Victory Games. Victory Games was the little brother of the Avalon Hill Game Company. Founded in 1982 and based in New York City, the studio was led by the legendary designer Mark Herman. Though short-lived, Victory Games became one of the most influential wargame publishers of the era. Staffed largely by former SPI designers after SPI's collapse, they carried forward that tradition of deep, simulation-heavy design that appealed to serious hobbyists, especially grognards who craved realism and historical texture. Their catalog includes classics like Mark Herman's Pacific War, Vietnam 1965 to 1975, and the solitaire offering Ambush. But among their most beloved and enduring designs is the Civil War 1861 to 1865, created by Eric Lee Smith. Now, I've been playing and collecting board games since the late 60s, and I started wargaming in 1974. My first game that I ever purchased was Luftwaffe. In more than 50 years in the hobby, I've played a lot of Civil War games. Yet, in the 40-plus years since its release, nothing has matched the playability, sweep, and feel of Victory Games' The Civil War. It astonishes me that, unlike Pacific War and Vietnam, this masterpiece has never been reissued. Tonight, I'm going to play through the 1861 scenario of this old favorite, and I hope I can convey just how elegant and engaging this design truly is. Just to show you how impressed I was with Victory Games, back in the day, I bought 2 copies of each of their titles, one to play and one to keep unpunched. And I'm very glad I did. I've purchased 2 copies of Pacific War, 2 copies of Vietnam 1965 to 1975, and 2 copies of the Civil War 1861 to 1865. For tonight's video, I'm bringing out my pristine copy of the Civil War because my play copy has been loved into the ground. Many of the pieces are pretty worn. For tonight's playthrough, I'm going to include an official variant that was featured in the Victory Insider in 1984. And yes, I have preserved all of my copies of the General and Victory Insider issues. This variant is entitled Battle Tested and was developed by Glenn Rahman. It allows the players to experience the thrill of not knowing the capabilities of your generals at the start of the game, just like Lincoln and Davis. And that is one of the shortcomings when you're doing a historical war game. The players know automatically the capabilities of these leaders. You know, there's a huge difference between Robert E. Lee and Ben Butler. So we automatically know that. But in this variant, this allows us to experience, just like in real life, you appoint a general to command and you don't know his capabilities until he shows them. The generals are going to be revealed only when required, and we're using the variant counters that came with that issue of the Victory Insider. So what we're doing is we're going to be using these variant counters. These basically list just the rank in stars of the general, but we don't know his capabilities. The actual generals are going to be kept in draw cups based on their rank, 1, 2, or 3 star, or a cavalry general. The Union admirals will be the only counters that will know face up. Now, the purpose of this video is basically just to demonstrate this old classic. I haven't played this game in probably 25 years, so it'll be just as fresh for me as it will be for any of the younger viewers that have never seen this game. To help us in the playthrough, I've created this battle board, and this will help to organize, and I'll be able to demonstrate the battles a little bit better with this battle board. Now, this is not going to be a teaching video, this is strictly going to be a playthrough video, but I will demonstrate the mechanics as we go by. In addition, I've created some army cards, and this will be a little easier for us to organize our forces when they are incorporated into armies. Now, here's a look at the game board. This is going to cover basically from Oklahoma to North Carolina, and from the northern portions of Illinois to the mid-range of Florida. So it's quite a good sized map. Now, we've set this up for the 1861 scenario, and this scenario will be 3 turns long if we make it that far. This game has a impulse system, meaning that each game turn, you never know how long it's going to be. It could be very, very short or very, very long for each of the turns. So we'll have to see how this goes, but my main purpose in this video is to, number one, revisit a very friendly game to myself, and number two, to let the viewers just see the quality of what Victory Games produced back in the 80s. So it is turn 1, and that is the summer of 1861, July and August. Now, just as it was in the historical conflict, the border states are going to be the main focus for turn 1 and who controls them. In Missouri, we've got the Union pretty much controlling everything at this point. If the Confederates are unable to retake at least one city, Missouri will fall to the Union. Right now, the Union has an unknown 1-star general and 5,000 men. Each strength point is about 5,000 men, by the way. 5,000 men in Springfield. And outside the city, Confederates have a 1-star brigadier general and 2 strength points. So we'll see what happens in Missouri. Our next border state is Kentucky. Kentucky begins the game neutral. If either of the combatants move into Kentucky, they'll violate Kentucky neutrality, and the state will go to the opposite side. At present, we've got Confederate forces across the river in the southeastern portion of Missouri. We've got Federal forces kind of lining the borders in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. And we have a small Confederate force under an unknown 3-star general in Nashville, and he has 5,000 men there. And our last neutral is West Virginia. Currently, all of the cities in West Virginia are controlled by the Union. They've got Wheeling, Grafton. The only exception is Charleston, West Virginia. If the Union is able to capture and control that location of Charleston, West Virginia will fall to the Union as well. Now, in reality, Maryland was actually considered a neutral, but the Union acted quickly to secure that to Union control. So that's why it's in blue. Now, each game year is going to follow an 8-phase sequence of play. We begin with the reinforcement phase, and what we'll do there is we look for each side, both the Confederates and for the Union, the number of reinforcements that they will have available to them in each of the theaters, East, West, Trans-Mississippi, and sometimes discretionary reinforcements. Occasionally, the Confederacy will have access to ironclads and CSA raiders. The Union will have access to river and ocean-going transports, along with river ironclads and ocean ironclads. The chart also lists each side's access to rail capacity. As an example, in turn 1, the rail capacity for the South is 4. I've made some tokens to account for the rail capacity. Union's rail capacity is always 6. So we've given them 6 counters. So then what we do is we check the chart and we provide the number of reinforcements listed for each side. So we're going to use our reinforcement tracks to track the number of reinforcements available for each theater. In the case of the Union on turn 1, they have access to 3 in the east, 3 in the west, 1 in the Trans-Mississippi, and 2 discretionary reinforcements. And in a similar fashion for the South, they're going to have 3 reinforcements in the east, 3 in the west, 1 in the Trans-Mississippi, and 1 discretionary reinforcement. Then we take all of the leaders that are available during the turn and we're going to place them in the leader pool. Now, since we're using the variant, we have unknown leaders here and we're going to be randomly drawing these leaders, and I'll probably use a die to randomly determine which leader is going to enter into the game. We'll do the same for the Union. And so we'll place the Union available leaders in their leader pool. So when we're called for to reveal a leader, that's when we're going to draw from the cup and determine his actual identity and capabilities. We're also going to note the Union's sea lift capacity. Each turn, the Union has a certain number of points that they can use for sea lift. In the case of the first turn, they have 2, so we mark that on the general records track. And we'll mark their sea lift capacity at 2. Incidentally, the Union begins with 9 victory points, and that represents the holdings that they have on the map at the start of the game. Our next phase is the command phase, and we're going to determine how many command points each player will receive. We're going to secretly place these tokens on the resource allocation track for each theater, East, West, and Trans-Mississippi. And this is where we put on our hats playing Lincoln or Jefferson Davis. And we'll decide where the main focus of the turn will be. The choices will be primary, secondary, and tertiary. Now, this game is not a solitaire game, but it lends itself extremely well for solitaire play. There is virtually no hidden information other than the hidden information that we're adding for the leader variant. Now, for the opening turn, the North has placed the East as the primary theater, the West as the secondary theater, and the Trans-Mississippi as the tertiary. And I think we're going to do the same for the South. So we're going to place primary in East, secondary in West, and tertiary for the Trans. And now both players are going to roll 2d6, and we're going to be consulting the command points table. And so we're going to be rolling 2d6 for the Confederacy, and that roll will be used, and then for each column, primary, secondary, tertiary, discretionary, and if you're the U.S., you'd have a certain number of naval commands. The Confederacy will be rolling the red dice, and the U.S. will be rolling blue. Here's the Confederate roll. Okay, they have a 7. So checking the chart, 7, we've got 6 in the East, which is our primary theater, 4 in the West, which is our secondary theater, 1 in the tertiary, which is the Trans, 2 discretionary, and the Confederates don't get any naval command points. They have to use discretionary commands to move naval units. So we'll mark this chart accordingly. And so we record those available command points on the chart. And as we spend them, they will start moving down the track towards 0. And we'll do the same for the Federals. Here's their roll. Okay, their result is a 10. So we'll check the 10 roll and give the U.S. the listed number of command points. And so we mark the results accordingly. Oh, and incidentally, any Union naval forces on the reinforcement track go into the Union naval pool, and they can purchase all of the forces in that naval pool for either 2 discretionary commands or 2 naval commands. The Confederates have to purchase each of their ships individually at a cost of 2 discretionary points. Step 3 is going to be the CSA Commerce Raider phase. If the Confederacy had any commerce raiders, such as the famous Alabama, they would roll 2d6 and they would record the number of Union ships sunk with that result. On a result of 12, they take no prizes and the raider is sunk. Now the Union can modify this by spending naval command points to modify the roll. So as an example, prior to the Confederacy rolling for the raiders, the Union could spend 3 naval command points. And then that 3 points would be added to the die roll. So on a result of 9, 10, 11, or 12, the raider would be sunk. And any U.S. ships that are sunk by these raiders will eventually provide victory points for the Confederacy. Phase 4 is the blockade effects phase, and what will happen here is the Confederacy is going to total all of their production cities and production locations, and they're going to mark that on the general records track. At the start of the game, the Confederacy has 100 points of production, and so we mark the CSA production at 100. As the Union starts taking these production locations and cities, that production, CSA production, will drop, and then that's going to have certain effects that will be cumulative during the game, making it more expensive for them to bring in naval ironclads, supply limits will be shortened, etc. The next step of the blockade phase is the Confederates will add up all of their port points. Around the map there are these port boxes, and then there will be a number in that port box, and that is the port capacity of that location. At the start of the game, the Union has taken away the ability of the Confederacy to use several ports, in particular Petersburg, Norfolk, and Pensacola. So when you add up all of the Confederate port boxes and you add in the 7 points that is considered off map in the southwestern parts of Texas, it comes to a total of 40 points. So then we check the board and we look at the blockade percentage. On turn 1, the blockade percentage is 0, so that means that all 40 of those port points are going to go to the Confederacy. But in future turns, as the Union blockade of the Anaconda Plan takes its toll, you'll see the numbers starting to go up, 10%, 20%, etc. So as an example, on turn 2, there would be a 10% blockade. We would take that 40 port points and subtract out 10%, and that would leave the Confederacy with 36 port points, as an example. So what we do then is we take the CSA production and we add in their port points that they've earned, in this case 40. So we take the 100 production plus 40, and that means that the CSA imports marker is at 140. Once that total drops beneath 100, that is when the Confederacy will start feeling the effects of the Anaconda Plan. And now we're going to move on to phase 5, and this is the heart of the game. This is the action phase. During this phase, each side is going to roll 2d6, and we're going to note the numbers. The side that has the highest action roll will have the initiative, and that will allow them to bring in either a leader or a reinforcement somewhere on the board. Now, each turn is going to consist of a variable number of pulses. We start the game with the CP table use marker in the 1 space. Now you'll see some values at the bottom there. If the Confederates and the Union ever roll identical numbers for their initiative, the CP table use marker will move up, and then each side will gain additional command points. we mark those command points with the die roll difference reminder. So what will happen is we're going to roll 2 dice for each side. We'll say that the Union rolled an 8 and the Confederacy rolled a 6. Well, the differential between the two is 2 points. So we would move that dice differential to the Union side for 2, and we would put out the Union initiative token. Now, as the turn progresses, we're either going to exhaust all of our commands and reinforcements and leaders, or this CP table use marker will continue to move up, giving us additional command points for the turn. Now, you'll see that when it moves to its second position, there's a 7 there. That means that if both sides tie with a result of 7, the turn ends immediately. And it gets progressively easier to get those ties. In the third slot, it's 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. And finally, once it gets to the fourth slot, any tie will end the turn. And so each side is going to make their initiative roll now, and this will be the Union roll. Union has rolled a 2. Wow. Now the Confederates will roll. And they've rolled a 4. So we note those. In this case, the Confederacy has rolled higher, so they're going to gain the initiative. And in turn, we note the difference in the rolls. 4 minus 2 is 2, so the Confederates will have the initiative. They can enter in either a leader or a reinforcement, and then spend 2 command points of some nature. And this is where the game really shines. I'm going to bring up a copy of the command point cost chart. And this chart will list the number of command points that it costs to do a certain activity. We can either move strength points, move naval strength points, move a leader. We can enter a leader in as a reinforcement, build an army, a depot, a fort, a fortress, etc. So as the Confederate player, we have to take a look at the number of command points that we have in the different theaters, the number of reinforcements we have, and we would also check our leader pool, and we have to decide where we want to take our first actions. Our considerations now are going to be mostly tied to these border states, in particular West Virginia and Missouri. If we're not able to take Charleston, West Virginia, more than likely the Union will be able to move a force there. They have 5,000 men in Petersburg right now, so they could easily move in there and take it. So we could either enter in a reinforcement in, say, as an example, in Stoughton. That would be at least close to where the forces are operating. The Union has a 3-star general with 10,000 men in West Virginia, along with 5,000 in Parkersburg. So it's going to be a tough nut to crack there for the Confederacy. I think a better option would be to take a reinforcement into Fayetteville in the Trans-Mississippi. I think that would probably be our best bet, and that will give us a chance to reinforce the Confederate 1-star general that is just outside of Springfield, Missouri, which is now being controlled by a Union 1-star and 5,000 men. So I think we are going to do that. So we're going to reduce our Trans-Mississippi reinforcements by 1. It's at 0 now. And then we can place 1 strength point inside the Trans-Mississippi. Now, strength point reinforcements have to go into either a location with a depot or into a location with a city. The other option is to place it directly into an army as long as it is a supplied location. There's no armies on the board at this point. These are just individual commands. So we're going to place those 5,000 reinforcements in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And now the Confederacy can spend the 2 command points, which is the dice differential. And I think our first point we're going to spend by using rail movement, and we're going to rail these 5,000 men that are in Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're going to use the rail system to rail them to our force that is near Manassas. We currently have a 3-star general of unknown capability there, along with 20,000 men. The Union has put across the Potomac 5,000 men into Virginia, and they have a very large force here in Washington, commanded by a 3-star general, and they have a total of 7 strength points there, and that's 35,000 men. And so the Confederacy is going to spend 1 point of their dice differential, and they're going to spend 1 Eastern command point. So we reduce our Eastern command points down 1, and then we're able to move that unit by rail. So the Confederacy is going to spend 1 of their rail points. They have 4 per turn for the moment. And that allows us to move as far as we want along any connected, controlled rail lines. So in this case, the North Carolinians are going to travel using the rail system, and they'll move into that space with our general in Manassas. And that's going to give us a total of 5 strength points there now. So we're going to change that over to a 5. And so that force now is composed of 25,000 men with a 3-star general of unknown capability commanding. Now there's 1 point of dice differential remaining on the chart, so the Confederates can spend that. They must spend it to either bring in a reinforcement with command points, or a leader, or move a force. So we'll spend that 1 point and see what we want to do with that. And I think we're going to spend another command point in the east, and we're going to move another force by rail, and we're going to reinforce our position in Manassas. And I think rather than using rail, we're going to move this force overland. So what we'll do is we're going to use the forces in Richmond. That's 2 strength points. We'll separate them into 2 single formations. And at a cost of 1 command point, we can move an uncommanded strength point up to its maximum movement allowance. All the forces have a movement allowance of 4, with the exception of cavalry. They have a movement allowance of 6. So we'll move this force overland, and it will move 1, 2, 3, 4 into our forces in Manassas, and that's going to move us out up to 6 there. We've got 30,000 men and a 3-star leader in Manassas. So the Confederates have spent all of the dice differential, and now the Union gets to spend their 2 points of differential. They're going to spend 1 point of differential, and they're going to use an Eastern command point, and they're going to activate a force for movement. So we'll move the dice differential down 1, and we will activate a force. So the Union is going to activate this single strength point that they have currently in Parkersburg, and they're going to activate that for movement. Now, even though there's no leader on this hex with this unit, the strength points are still considered to have a leader of unknown name. Forces are arranged by sizes. Between 1 and 3 strength points is a small force, and that would be more like divisional level, usually commanded by a 1-star general. Then we've got a medium strength, which would be between 4 and 9 strength points, and that would be more like a corps, normally commanded by a 2-star general. And then we have large forces, which are 10 strength points or more, and that would be considered an army level and normally commanded by a 3 or 4-star general. Now, when these forces activate for movement and they don't have a leader, they're able to move as long as it's in friendly territory or in neutral territory. But they cannot enter, in the case of a Union force, they cannot enter a gray space. And the same would go for the Confederates. The Confederates can enter a white space or a gray space, but not a blue unless there's a leader commanding it. So we're going to activate this force in Parkersburg, and we'll move it 2 spaces into Charleston. And we're going to take control of that space, and that is going to give the Union If all things remain the same, control of West Virginia. And so we'll mark Charleston with a Union control marker. Now all forces, when they activate, have 4 movement points. Each space on the board costs 1 movement point, with the exception of swamp terrain, which costs 2 movement points. Cavalry forces, which are commanded by a cavalry general, have 6 movement points. Now I should point out that when leaders are moving units on the board, there's a certain limit to the number of strength points that they can command. As an example, a 1-star general can command 1 or 2 strength points. 2-star general can command 1 to 6. A 3-star general can command 1 to 6 or an army. And finally, a 4-star general can command 1 to 6 strength points, an army, or all armies in a hex. The Union has 1 point of dice differential remaining, so they're going to spend that 1 point, and I believe they're going to do a Trans-Mississippi command. So we'll reduce the Trans-Mississippi commands for the Union from 2 down to 1, and we can spend that 1 point in that theater. And I think the Union is going to activate this division that they have in Lexington. And we're going to have that move 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, into Fort Scott, Kansas. And they're going to go there to guard that U.S. depot, supply depot that is located there. Because theoretically, this Confederate force could move and capture those supplies. So we want to prevent that. And so now, with all of the dice differentials spent by both sides, a new round will start. And once again, we're going to be rolling 2 dice for each side and noting the dice differential, if any. Here's the Union roll. And they've got an 8. Confederate roll is a 7. So the Union has won that by 1. So we give the Union its initiative token, and we're going to note a 1-point dice differential. The Union can bring in a reinforcement or a leader for free now, since they've won the initiative. And I think the Union will select a reinforcement for their initiative. The Union is going to bring in an Eastern Theater reinforcement. So we'll move their reinforcements down to 2, and we'll place a reinforcement in the Eastern Theater. And I think the Union is going to bring that into the Capitol in Washington. Currently they have a fort with a 3-star general and 7 strength points. So we're going to bring in an extra reinforcement into the Capitol in Washington, D.C. And that's going to move their total up to 8 strength points, and that's 40,000 men. Now the Union will spend their 1 point of dice differential, and they're going to use a Western command point. So we'll reduce the Union Western command points from 3 to 2, and we'll spend that point in the Western Theater. And I think the Union is going to rail in a strength point from Springfield, Illinois into Cairo. So we're going to spend 1 Union rail point, and we're going to move this from 2 strength points down to 1, and then we're going to rail that unit into Cairo. So we'll follow the railroad tracks till we get to Cairo, and then that unit will be flipped to a strength of 2. Cairo is a very important location for the Union. They use that as a major naval base on the Mississippi and on the Ohio rivers. Now the Confederates have 1 point of dice differential, and we'll spend that in some fashion. Confederacy is going to bring in a reinforcement in the east, so we'll reduce our reinforcements from 3 down to 2, and then we will place that on the map. And I think we'll place that in the city of Fredericksburg. There's 1 strength point there already. We'll up that to 2 now. What we want to do is make sure that we don't have a Union force coming down towards Richmond, so that'll help to serve as a blocker. And with all of the dice differential spent by both sides, we'll continue another pulse. We'll roll the dice and see what we get. Okay, this time the Confederacy has a total of 8. The Union has a total of 7. So we have a 1 point dice differential in favor of the Confederacy, and they're going to have the initiative. So they'll be able to bring in a leader or a reinforcement. And I think for their free reinforcement or leader, they're going to bring in a leader. So what we'll do is we'll just roll a d6, and then we will select the leader randomly from the leader pool. But we have to tell where that leader is going to go. And I think we'll place that leader in the capital of Richmond. So the Confederacy will roll a die. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And this is going in Richmond. The result is a 5. So the fifth leader is a 1-star leader, and that's going to be placed in the capital of Richmond. And so we'll place that 1-star general in the capital of Richmond, and he is currently taking command of 5,000 troops in the capital. And now the Confederates have 1 point of dice differential to spend. So as you can see, the tempo of this game is controlled by that dice differential. If the differential is very low, like we've been having, you don't have enough command points available at one time to execute what you might want to do on the board. Right now we've had 1 and 2 point dice differentials. There's not enough to even activate a leader on the board to move him. So you're kind of basically keeping your command points. You don't want to spend them piecemeal. You want to keep them so that you have enough to be able to do something major, but you have to use the dice differential in some fashion, either reinforcements, command points, or bringing in a leader. So you're kind of like waiting until the dice differential is large enough to actually execute what you'd like to do. In this case now, the Confederates have 1 point of dice differential, and they'll spend that in some fashion. So we'll move that down by 1. And in this case, the Confederates are going to enter in a Western reinforcement. We'll lower our Western reinforcements down to 2, and we'll place a reinforcement in the Western Theater. Incidentally, the theaters are delineated with this heavy black line. In this case, on the Mississippi, that divides the West from the Trans-Mississippi. And there's a similar one in the western part of West Virginia, leading through into Tennessee, and finally exiting on the Savannah River in South Carolina. That's the Eastern Theater. So we're going to bring in a reinforcement in the west, and I think we're going to bring that in to this very important city of Memphis. It has 4 victory points there, and it's absolutely vital in maintaining our connection to the Trans-Mississippi. If the Union can divide the Confederacy in half if they control St. Louis, Cairo, Memphis, Vicksburg, Port Hudson, and New Orleans. So we need to keep those cities. Once the Trans-Mississippi is divided from the Confederacy, they have their own individual points that have to be calculated, and that theater will just slowly die on the vine generally. So we want to keep that connection to the Trans as long as possible. So I'm going to bring in a reinforcement into Memphis. Currently there's a 2-star general with 10,000 men there, and we're going to bring in an additional point, moving that up to 15,000 men. So we've moved that up to a 3-strength unit. All right. And now the Union has 1 point of dice differential to spend, so they will do so, moving that down to 0. And the Union is going to bring in a reinforcement in the east, so we'll move their reinforcements down to 1, and we'll enter a Union reinforcement. And they're going to place that in Washington, D.C. It's very important that the Union controls Washington, D.C. The Confederates would gain an enormous amount of victory points by either isolating Washington or by physically controlling it with a supplied unit. And I believe that's 30 victory points, so that's quite a bit. So we'll do another turn, and we'll roll for our initiative. In this case, we've got quite a bit of differential. The Union has 7, the Confederacy has 11, and that's going to give us a 4-point differential with the Confederacy having the initiative. So something meaningful might happen this turn. We'll begin with the Confederacy either entering a reinforcement or a leader. And I think the Confederacy will enter a eastern reinforcement. That'll move their eastern reinforcements down to 1. And I think we're going to place that reinforcement in Strasburg. We want to make sure that we don't have any problems in the Shenandoah Valley. And now the Confederacy has 4 points of dice differential to spend. So checking our command point cost chart, I think the Confederacy is going to spend 2 eastern commands to build an army. That says it may be built in a hex that is in supply and contains either a 3 or 4-star leader and at least 1 strength point. The hex cannot contain a demoralized force. May use either discretionary or theater command points. Well, we're going to spend 2 points. 2 points of dice differential, and we're going to construct the Army of Northern Virginia. So we'll spend 2 eastern command points, moving us down from 4 down to 2. And so we're going to build the Army of Northern Virginia, and we're going to place that in its historical location, which is near Bull Run. So what we do there is we're going to remove the forces, currently a 3-star general and 6 strength points. So we will remove those forces from the board, and we're going to place the Army of Northern Virginia in that location. Now, armies have many advantages. First, we can put leaders and strength points directly into the army as long as it's in supply. That's the first advantage. The second advantage is it has a zone of control. It has a zone of control in its space and in the 6 spaces around it. If a force moves into that zone of control, the leader of the army can make an initiative roll in an attempt to react. So it's quite valuable. So now we move to the Army track and we record the number of strength points contained in the Army of Northern Virginia. In this case, it is 6. So we mark the Northern Virginia SPs at 6. Now I've created these Army cards. This doesn't come with the game. This is a custom creation of my own. And this is just a nice way to be able to differentiate everything within an army. You'll notice that on these there's maximum size. Each army has a maximum size that it can have. The Army of Northern Virginia is 20, Army of Tennessee is 15, Army of Mississippi is 10, and Army of the West is 6. For the Union, the Army of the Southwest is 6, Army of the James is 6, Army of the Potomac is 25, Army of the Cumberland is 20, and Army of the Tennessee is 12. So what we're going to do then is we'll place our unknown 3-star general in command of the Army of Northern Virginia, and we'll also list the 6 strength points, 6 divisions that he has in that army. Now we're still recording those strength points on the Army track as a backup, but this gives us a direct view of what's in that army. Now if we have any leaders that will come in, subordinates, they will go in the subordinates area. Now the Confederacy has 2 points of dice differential remaining, and I think we're going to spend those 2 to create another army out west. So we'll spend the 2, moving us to 0. And we're going to spend 2 western command points, moving it down from 4 down to 2. And we're going to create the Army of the Tennessee in Nashville. Currently, the force in Nashville consists of an unknown 3-star general and 1 strength point. So we are going to get out the Army of the Tennessee. So the forces in Nashville will be removed, and we'll place there the Army of the Tennessee. We'll record its strength points at 1. And then we'll place our commanding 3-star general in command of the Army of the Tennessee. We don't know who he is yet. And his lone 5,000 men strength point. Maximum size of the Army of the Tennessee is 15 strength points. And now the Union has 4 points of dice differential to spend. And they as well are going to spend 2 points. And they're going to create the Army of the Potomac in Washington, D.C. So we'll move the Union Eastern Command points down to 1, and we'll create the Army of the Potomac. So we'll take everything that is in Washington right now, which consists of a fort, a 3-star general, and a total of 9 strength points. So we will take that and place that off map for now, and we'll place the Army of the Potomac in Washington along with the fort. And we'll mark the Army of the Potomac with 9 strength points, 45,000 men. And we'll place the commanding general, 3-star, in the Army of the Potomac along with his 9 strength points. All right, the Union has 2 points left to spend of differential. I think we're going to spend 1 point in Missouri to try to solidify our position there, and another command point in the west, and we'll try to build up our forces on the border of Kentucky in case the Confederates violate Kentucky neutrality. We'll have some forces ready. So we'll spend 1 point of Trans-Mississippi command point and 1 in the west. With the Trans-Mississippi command point, we're going to activate that force in Fort Scott, and they're going to move to reinforce our position in Springfield. So it'll move 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that will move us up to a total of 2 strength points with a 1-star general in Springfield. Now, incidentally, we do have the option of destroying this supply depot in Fort Scott. If we feel that that could be captured by the South, we can destroy that if we choose. But we're within range to be able to move to Fort Scott and contest anything that it would be happening there. So for right now, we'll leave the supply depot where it is. In the west, we're going to activate a strength point in Indianapolis. So we'll move that from 2 to 1. And we'll get another strength point out, and we'll move that south to Albany. 1, 2, 3. That'll move that Albany force up to 2, and now we're in position with a force to move into Kentucky if we choose. Okay, the dice differential has been spent by both sides, and we'll roll for more initiative. Okay, this time the Confederates have 11, and the Union has 8. So the Confederates will have 3 points of dice differential, and they're going to win the initiative. So they'll allow them a reinforcement or a leader. And the Confederates are going to bring in a leader into the Army of Northern Virginia. Because this is an army now, we can take reinforcements and leaders directly into the army. That's one of the big advantages of an army. So we'll roll a d6, and on the result of a 6, we'll re-roll. There's 5 leaders in the pool. So here's the roll. Roll is a 2, and that's a 1-star general. So we'll be adding that 1-star general into the Army of Northern Virginia. So we'll add that unknown 1-star general into the subordinates area of the Army of Northern Virginia. Now the Confederacy has a total of 3 dice differential to spend. And we'll see what we want to do with that. These are the reinforcements and command points that the Confederacy has left. And I think we're just going to soft pedal this. We're defending, and we'll let the enemy come to us. So I think what we'll do is we're going to enter in a reinforcement in the east. We'll place that directly into the Army of Northern Virginia, and we'll also bring in a leader. So we've got 4 leaders in the leader pool, and we'll just roll a d6. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5 or 6 will be a reroll. That's a 3. 1, 2, 3. It's a 1-star general, and we're going to add that to the Army of Northern Virginia. So we're going to add that unknown 1-star general into the subordinates area, along with 1 extra reinforcement, moving the Army of Northern Virginia up to 7. And in addition, we'll move the Army of Northern Virginia on the Army tracker up to 7. So we spent 2 of our 3 dice differential. It leaves us with 1 left. And I think we'll spend that dice differential to bring in a reinforcement in the west into the Army of Tennessee. So we'll reduce our western reinforcements down by 1, and we'll add a point into the Army of Tennessee. So that'll increase the strength of the Army of Tennessee from 1 up to 2. That actually should be down here in the divisions area. And we'll do the same on the Army tracker, moving that from 1 to 2. And now the Union has 3 points of dice differential. Currently the Union has 1 command point in the east, and they have 2 discretionary command points. So there would be sufficient amount of command points to move the Army of the Potomac and launch an attack into Virginia. The problem is, if something goes wrong, we won't be able to rally the force. So I think we're going to take a different approach. I'm going to spend 2 points of differential, and we're going to spend 2 naval commands to enter in all the forces in our naval pool. At present, we've got an ocean-going transport and a river transport. We'll place those on the board. The ocean transport we're going to place in our main naval base in Philadelphia. And for our river transports, we're going to place them in Cairo. Now this would be a good opportunity to show the viewers about how naval units operate. Naval forces operate on hex sides. Whether it's an ironclad or a transport, it has naval control over rivers over 5 hex sides. So in this case, that force is controlling this hex side of a navigable river in front of Cairo. And it also will extend 5 hex sides in all directions unless it comes to a fort or an enemy fort or an enemy naval vessel. So in the case of this river transport, it controls this section and 5 more in each side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he has naval control all the way up to hex 2010, 2110. Same would go as it's going down the Ohio River. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He has control all the way up to here, 2511, 2410. Now his control down both the Cumberland and the Tennessee rivers is different because there is a Confederate fort there, and that's the very famous Forts Donaldson and Henry. So his control would stop as soon as that hits the hex side of that fortification. So as an example, he would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, it doesn't quite get there. So in this case, the transport has control all the way up to here. Now, the control of a navigable river is very important. A force cannot cross into enemy territory across a controlled navigable river. And whenever they do cross a navigable river, there's defensive benefits for the side defending on the other side. But that's how the naval units work in a very simplistic manner. There's more to it than that, but for right now, that is enough to let the viewers know how those operate. Union has 1 point of dice differential to spend, and they're going to bring in a western reinforcement. We'll move that from 3 down to 2. And I think once again, they're going to bring in a reinforcement into Cairo. So we're going to move Cairo up from 2 strength points. Adding an additional 1, we'll move that up to 3. And that combined with the naval control is going to pretty much protect that location. And we'll continue on with another round, and we're going to roll for initiative. This time the Confederacy has a total of 10, and the Union has 8. That'll be a 2-point differential for the Confederacy, giving them the initiative. And they can bring in a leader or a reinforcement. And I think they're going to bring in a leader into the Army of Northern Virginia. And we'll go 2, 4, 6 for the results. Results of 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it'll be this 3-star general is going to go into the Army of Northern Virginia. So we'll place the 3-star general in the subordinates area of the Army of Northern Virginia. As these generals have not been revealed yet, we don't know who is going to be the ranking general, but it will be one of the 2 3-star generals, and the other would be subordinate to that general. So the Confederacy has 2 points of dice differential to spend. And I think the Confederacy is going to use 2 points of dice roll differential. They're going to bring in a discretionary reinforcement and a leader, and both of those are going to go into the Army of Northern Virginia. So we'll reduce our discretionary reinforcements down 1, it's down to 0. Discretionary reinforcements can be placed into any theater. And we're also going to select a leader, so it'll be odd and even. It is an even result, so that'll be the 1-star general. We'll place that and a strength point into the Army of Northern Virginia. So we'll place a 1-star subordinate general into the Army of Northern Virginia, and then we're going to increase their strength from 7 up to 8. 40,000 men. And now the Union has 2 points of differential to spend. And I think they're going to bring in 2 leaders. We need to get some leadership. And I think both of them are going to be placed in the Army of the Potomac. So we've got a total of 8 leaders in the pool. We'll roll a d8 to determine which ones. First one is 1, and that's a 1-star general. That'll be placed in the Army of the Potomac. Next roll. We'll shift these down, and we'll just re-roll a 8. Results of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be Admiral Foote. All right. All right, since Admiral Foote is a naval commander, we won't place him in the Army of the Potomac. We'll put him in Washington, but he won't be a part of the Army. We'll probably end up moving him to Philadelphia, where he'll be more useful. But we will place the 1-star general in the Army of the Potomac. So we'll place a subordinate 1-star general in the Army of the Potomac. Okay, here is the initiative roll. And we've got a 4 for the Confederates and a 9 for the Union. That is very interesting. That's a dice roll differential of 5. That's the largest that we've had. And that's going to give the Union the initiative, allowing them to bring in a leader or reinforcement. And I think the Union is going to bring in a Eastern reinforcement directly into the Army of the Potomac. And that's going to move the strength up from 9 up to 10. All right. Now the Union has 5 dice roll differential to spend. And I think the Army of the Potomac is going to finally get moving. So we're going to begin by spending 2 points of dice roll differential. We get down to 3. And we're going to bring in 2 discretionary reinforcements into the Army of the Potomac. So the Union will spend 2 discretionary reinforcements, placing 2 more into the Army of the Potomac. That'll move the strength of the Army of the Potomac up to 12. And now I think we're going to get things moving. We'll spend the remaining 3 dice roll differential. And we're going to use 2 discretionary commands and an Eastern command to activate the Army of the Potomac. So we'll spend 1 Eastern and 2 discretionary. And we're going to activate the Army of the Potomac for movement. And so the lumbering Army of the Potomac will finally start moving into Northern Virginia. Now we have a strength point here. We can't pick up strength points as we move. We can drop them off, but we can't pick them up. So I think what we'll do now, we don't want to cross a navigable river in the sphere of influence of an enemy army, because if they reacted and say they defeated us, there is an enormous penalty for initiating an attack across a navigable river. So instead, the Army of the Potomac is going to move 1, then 2 into that space. This is a unnavigable river here in this portion. It ends right there at that railhead. So we will move 1 and 2. And now that we've moved into the sphere of influence of the Army of Northern Virginia, that Army commander can, if he chooses, make a reaction roll. And I think at this time the Confederates are more than happy to remain where they are. If they were to react into that space, that other strength point that is there would have to be taken into account in the battle. So they will just simply let the Army of the Potomac do what they will. The Army of the Potomac has spent 2 of its movement points, and they're going to spend a third. Their choice would be either to move here into this railhead, or move and attack the Army of Northern Virginia, or attempt to flank them. There's another Confederate force near Harper's Ferry up there, so to decide what to do. If we move due south, the Confederates could end up reacting into that space, or on another pulse, they could end up cutting our supply lines. Right now, our supply lines are going through that river, across the river and the rail line. So if they were to move in back of us, they would cut our supply lines. So we might be better served to try to move into the hex with the Army of Northern Virginia and bring them to battle. So we will do that. But the Army of Northern Virginia can get a reaction. It's not only the zone of control around the Army, but also in the space of the Army. And if they're able to successfully react, they can move into an adjoining space that is not adjacent to the Army itself. So there would be this space here in the wilderness, here, or into Strasburg. Those would be the possible reaction locations for the Army of Northern Virginia. But I think they're going to accept battle where they are. They're not going to roll for reaction. Now, the smart play might be to pull back across the Rappahannock River into this woods, and we would get some defensive benefits for not only the river, but for the woods as well. But I think we're going to accept battle. So, the Army of the Potomac is going to move into the space with the Army of Northern Virginia, and we're going to have a battle. So we're going to replace these 2 tokens. We'll put them on the battle board, and we'll place a battle marker in that location to mark it. And we'll see how a combat works out. Okay, we're going to use this battle board to help us resolve the battle. This will help us to understand all the dynamics involved. On the attacking side, we have the Army of the Potomac, commanded by a 3-star general. He has a subordinate 1-star general, and he's controlling a total of 12 strength points. 12 strength points gives him a large force. On the defense, we've got the Army of Northern Virginia, commanded by a 3-star general, and he has 4 subordinates, 3 brigadier generals and 1 3-star general, commanding a total of 8 strength points. 8 strength points is a medium-sized force. The attackers have not crossed any hex side that would give them any terrain bonus, and this is occurring in clear terrain. Now, as we have unrevealed generals, we're going to have to reveal those generals and see who is commanding both of the armies and their subordinates. So we're going to take our cup of Union 3-star generals, and we're going to mix that up, and then we're going to draw one and replace that 3-star generic general, and he will be the Army commander. Okay, here's the draw. And commanding the Army of the Potomac is... Halleck. Oh my goodness. He's one of the worst generals that there is. Okay. Now we're going to reveal a 1-star general for the Union to see who the subordinate leader is. So we'll mix up our 1-star generals and make a draw. And that 1-star general is General Lyon. Okay, well, he's pretty good. He's one of the better ones they have. Now we have to do the same for the Confederates. And we'll begin by selecting a 3-star general. And we're actually going to select 2 of them because one of those 2 will have the higher rank. So here's the first one. First one is Jay Johnston. All right. Second one is Albert Sidney Johnson. So we've got a couple of Johnsons up there. Okay, the highest ranked general out of the 2. It'll be a small number on the right-hand side. A.S. Johnston is a 1. J. Johnston is a... Those numbers are small. I'm having trouble seeing that. And he's a 3. So in this case, Albert Sidney Johnson is in command of the Army of Northern Virginia. Historically, he was out west, but in our version, that's where he is. Okay, now we have to place J. Johnston as a subordinate leader, and now we're going to have to draw 3 1-star generals to see who the remainder are. And the other generals are General Stonewall Jackson, one of the best ones they have. Here's the next one. And we've got Magruder. And the last one is General Price. Okay, so that is the leadership of the Confederacy and for the Union. Now don't forget, we're using a variant here. If this was the game without the variant, the commander of Northern Virginia would likely be Beauregard. That would be the most likely person who would be commanding because that's who it was historically. And the same for Army of the Potomac. It would not be Halleck. It would be McDowell. Okay, so this is the situation we've got right now. First thing we do is we look at the Army commanders. They're not going to be adding dice roll modifier, but what they will be doing is giving the opponents or themselves reroll tokens. Now in the case of Halleck, he's one of the worst. He's a 4-2-1. What that means is it takes 4 points to activate him. He gives, because his numbers are in a red box, he gives those to the opponent. That's how bad he is. So he's going to give 2 rerolls to the defender, and we'll give them 2 Confederate reroll tokens. And that's just what they do, just what they say. The Confederates can reroll, or they can force the Union to reroll. All right, next we look at the subordinate leaders. In this case, General Lyon. He is not in a red box. He has an activation of 2 and 2 for his tactical modifier. So he's going to give a +2 to the Union. And so we'll place a blue die in the dice rolls modifier area, signifying that it's a +2 for the Union. Now we'll take a look at the Army of Northern Virginia. We've got A.S. Johnston. He has a 3 activation, nothing for Army command, and nothing for a tactical command. So he has just the 2 rerolls that he's going to gain because Halleck is so bad. Now we'll look at his subordinates. Magruder will be giving the Confederates +1. Price is 0. Johnston is +1, and General Jackson is a +2. So if we add that together, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a +4 for the Confederacy. So we'll mark the Confederacy with a red die, signifying +4 for the Confederacy. If we used a white die, that would be a negative marker. And finally, we have to determine our combat ratio and differential. So what we're going to do is use this chart, and we're going to intersect the attacker's strength with the defender's strength. And that's going to give us a combat ratio that we're supposed to use to resolve this battle. We have 12 attacking Union against 8 defending Confederates. So 12, we move up to the 8 column, is G. So we'll start by using G as the basis of our battle odds table. And G corresponds to a +3 or +4 advantage. And now each side is going to roll 1 die, and we will add that to their dice roll modifiers to come up with a final number. So here's the roll. All right, the Confederates have rolled a 5, and the Union has rolled a 1. So now we're going to consult the combat results table. We're going to be using column G. There's no modifiers for terrain or anything, so with terrain you can either move left or right depending upon certain conditions. Both armies are in supply. So then we apply the results. We'll begin with the attacker. The attacker will locate his results under the defensive side of the column next to the size code of the attacking army. So in this case, we're going to be using column G. The result was a 3, and he has a large size army. So we'll be looking on the bottom row of that, and we move over until we hit the response for column G. That indicates 1. So that's a 1-step loss for the defenders. And I'll use these tiny dice to record the final battle results. Now we do the same, but for the defender. He has a total of 9. So we'll look under 9. He's using a medium-sized force to inflict his damage, so we'll be using the middle row of that. And we go all the way over till we go to the G column. In this case, he looks on the attacker's side. What is he doing to the attacker? It's a D2. All right. And that means that the Union forces would be demoralized and they would be taking 2-step loss. Now the Confederates have 2 reroll tokens. They can either force the Union to reroll, or they can use them to reroll their own dice. But I think in this case, the Confederates are quite happy with the decision that they have. Forcing a reroll against the Union wouldn't do too much because they've already rolled the lowest possible. And in our case, we've rolled a 5 out of a possible 6. So we're going to accept the results. So now we're going to apply the losses. In this case, the Confederates will have to lose 1 strength point, moving them from 8 down to 7. And the Union is going to lose 2, and they will become demoralized. So we'll place a demoralized marker in the strength point area, and they're going to lose 2 steps, dropping them down to 10 strength points. The side that inflicts the more damage wins the battle. In the case of a tie, the defender would win. But in this case, the defender has won the battle by inflicting greater damage to the enemy. So these dice can be removed. And now we have to check for leader losses and promotions. So we're going to get out our leader loss table, and we're going to be rolling 2 dice for each leader that participated in the battle, including the commanding generals. And if their rank falls within the result listed, they will either be wounded or killed. If they're not wounded or killed and they're eligible for promotion, we'll place their promotion ranks on the display. So we'll begin with Union casualties. We'll check for Halleck. He's a 3-star general, so the only result that is going to affect him would be a roll of 2. Here's his roll. He's rolled a 7, so he's fine. Now we'll check for Brigadier General Lyon. He is a 1-star general, and he's more apt to be wounded or killed. Here's the roll. And the roll is a 5, and that is a 1-star is wounded. So General Lyon was wounded in the battle, and we're going to place him on the turn display for next turn, and he'll come back as a reinforcement. Now we have to check for the Confederate generals. And we'll begin with the Army Commander, A.S. Johnston. Here's the roll. The result is a 7. He's fine. We'll move on to checking Brigadier General Magruder, a 1-star general. Result is a 10, and that's no effect. Okay, next is General Price. He rolled a 10, no effect. Now, General Price is currently a 1-star, but you'll see at the bottom, he is eligible to achieve 2-star rank. So we're going to get out General Price's 2-star token, and we're going to place that on next turn's display, and that can be a promotion for him. That's drawn. We replace wherever General Price is located. We place his upgrade there if he's drawn. Next, we have to check for Jay Johnston. He is a 3-star general. And he's rolled a 3, and that's close. If it would have been a 2, he could have been wounded or killed. And then finally, we've got Stonewall Jackson. He is eligible for promotion, so if he does not get wounded or killed, we'll find his promotion token. The roll is a 5, and he is wounded. So Stonewall Jackson is wounded in the first Battle of First Bull Run, and we'll place his token on the turn track for the next turn. And this is how a battle is resolved. What we do now is we're going to place all this information back on their army displays, and we're going to resolve the retreat of the Army of the Potomac. So the Army of the Potomac is forced into retreat following the Battle of First Bull Run, and they have to retreat back to where they came from. In addition, we're going to be placing a demoralized marker on that army. And now that the Union has used their 5 dice roll difference, now it is the Confederates' turn to use 5 dice roll difference, and they have a golden opportunity to inflict further damage on the Army of the Potomac. So checking the Army of Northern Virginia with A.S. Johnston in command, he has an initiative rating of 3. It'll take 3 command points to activate him for duty, and we're going to do so. The Confederates are going to spend 2 Eastern command points and 1 discretionary command point to activate A.S. Johnston's Army of Northern Virginia. That'll move the dice roll difference marker from 5 down to 2. They still have 2 points remaining to spend this turn. So the triumphant Army of Northern Virginia is on the move, and they are going to pursue the Army of the Potomac. They're going to move into their space. Now, poor Halleck has a demoralized army, but he can still attempt to react and to maybe cross the river into some safety. So General Halleck has to do something. He is going to try to cross the Potomac, try to get to some safety. Unfortunately, his initiative level is 4. In order to react to an army's movement, you have to roll higher than your initiative. And not only this, because he is a demoralized force, you have to subtract 1 from the roll. So this is going to be a tough roll for old Halleck. So this will be Halleck's reaction roll. He needs basically a 6. The roll is a 6. It's amazing. 6 minus 1, because he's demoralized, is 5. That's higher than his initiative. And the Army of the Potomac is able to escape, at least temporarily. So Halleck is going to retreat across the Potomac. Now, he cannot retreat directly into Washington. I don't know if you can see that, but that is a navigable river. You can't retreat across a navigable river. If you have to, and there's no other choice, the force is destroyed. So, in this case, Army of the Potomac, his only choice, taking the strength point with him that was there before, is to retreat to the north across the Potomac. Now, the Army of Northern Virginia can continue to pursue if they wish. They've expended 1 of their 4 movement points. Now, Washington is defended by a fort, meaning that they control the navigable river in front of that fort. So the Army of Northern Virginia cannot move directly into Washington, D.C. They will have to, if they choose to pursue, go across the unnavigable portion of the Potomac and try to launch another attack on Halleck there. And they will definitely do so. They will move across the Potomac and pursue the beleaguered Halleck. Well, for Halleck, he has no option other than to accept battle, because if he retreats, he can't retreat to Washington. It'll have to be to one of these three locations, which is where the Army of Northern Virginia, their line of access, came from. So he would have to retreat to here, here, or here. So he has to accept battle there. And so now we are going to continue with the pursuit of the Army of the Potomac. We've got the hapless Halleck in command of a demoralized Army of the Potomac. It's a large force consisting of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 strength points. He has no surviving subordinates. It's going to be in clear terrain. The victorious Army of Northern Virginia, under the command of A.S. Johnston, is going to be crossing an unnavigable river, the Potomac. It's going to give a shift to the left of the final battle odds once we calculate them. He's going to have the services of Magruder, J. Johnston, and Price to assist him. That's going to give him a dice roll modifier of +2. They're in command of a medium-sized force of 7 strength points. Now, as this is a demoralized force, the effect on the combat is very drastic. The effects of demoralization are as follows. A demoralized force can never enter an enemy-occupied hex and thus cannot attack. The CRT is shifted 1 column to the right if the defender is demoralized. The demoralized force will still receive column shifts for terrain, however. Demoralized force that is attacked uses a single unmodified die roll to resolve combat. There are no tactical combat ratings added or reroll options. When a demoralized force is attacked, all the attacker's tactical combat rating modifications and reroll options are doubled. This includes the ratings of the demoralized force that would normally help the opponent. So this is amazing. So we're going to have to double the tactical modifiers of the Confederacy from 2 up to 4. It's +4. And then Johnston will get no rerolls, but Halleck gives him 2, which are doubled, giving him 4 rerolls. So A.S. Johnston will have 4 reroll tokens to use if he chooses. It's amazing. So now we're going to figure out our battle odds. We've got 7 Confederate strength points attacking 11 defenders. 7. Moving over to 11 is C. So we'll start the combat with battle odds C. So we'll begin with battle odds of C, -3, -4. Now, because this is a demoralized force, the battle odds are moved 1 column to the right, making it column D. However, we're crossing an unnavigable river. It's going to give a left column shift, moving us back from D back to C. So this battle will be resolved on the C column. So each side is going to be rolling 1 die, and we'll add in any combat dice roll modifiers and get a final result. Here's the rolls. The Union has done the best they can. They've rolled a 6. Confederates have rolled a 4 for a total of 8. All right, so we'll check the battle results at present. So we're going to use column C, and we'll intersect the attacking Confederates. They have 8, and they're a medium-sized army. So we'll go to 8, using the medium size, going to C, and looking on the defender side. In this case, it's D1. So currently, in the battle, Union has lost 1 point, and they continue to be demoralized. We'll place a demoralized marker there. Now for the Union. Same situation. They're going to use 6. They are a large force, so we'll be using the bottom row. We slide that over to C, and we look on the attacker side, and that's D2. So we will mark that with a demoralization marker for the Confederates with 2 losses. So at present, the Confederates have lost the battle. They're going to use one of their reroll tokens, and they're going to force Halleck to reroll his combat die. Here's the roll, and he's rolled a 2. So we'll re-examine that. Die roll of 2, it was a large force for the Union, and we move over to C, and we check the attacker side, what happens to the attacker, and that's a D1. So that'll shift the result from D2 to D1. So at present, the battle is D1 to D1, and in this case, the defender would win the battle. Now we have 3 rerolls available. A.S. Johnston is going to use one of his rerolls to reroll his own die, and we'll see if he can get a better result than he did. Here's the roll. And he rolled a 1. That's much worse. His total right now is 5. So 5 with a medium force, moving over to C, checking for the damage to the defender is only a 1. So that would be the situation currently. It'd be a D1 to a 1, and that means that the defenders are still winning. A.S. Johnston will use another reroll and attempt to reroll his own die to get a better result. And he's rolled a 4, so he's right back where he was. It's a total of 8. 8, medium force, looking at the C column, and what happens to the defender, D1. So we're back up to a D1 result. Confederates are down to their last reroll. If they don't use it, they'll lose the battle. If they do use it, it could be a worse result than what they have. But I think A.S. Johnston will attempt to win. So he's going to use his last reroll, and we're going to reroll that die and see what happens. Here is the roll. And he's rolled a 5. We've got a total of 9 now for the battle. So looking at 9 with a medium force, that'll be the middle row. We'll go over to C, and we'll check what happens to the defender. And in this case, it is a D1 result again. A.S. Johnston is out of options, so this is the final results of the battle. Each side is going to lose 1 strength point, and they're going to be demoralized. Union will lose 1 strength point, so will the Confederates. Confederates are now a demoralized force, and the Army of the Potomac continues to be a demoralized force. All right. Now we're going to check for our leader losses, and we'll begin with the Army of Northern Virginia. We'll start with A.S. Johnston himself. Okay, here's the roll. The result is a 7, and that's no effect. We'll check Magruder, 1-star General Magruder. The result is an 8, no effect. We'll check 3-star General J. Johnston. A 9, no effect. And finally, 1-star General Price. The result is an 8, no effect. For the Union, we just have to check for old Brains Halleck. Here's the roll. He rolled a 10, no effect. So, in this case, he was able to beat back the Confederacy after they crossed the Potomac in pursuit of him. It's amazing. So the Army of Northern Virginia has to retreat back to where they came, on the other side of the Potomac. And now they are currently a demoralized force. Halleck, for all of his incompetence, was able to save the Union, and the Army of the Potomac rests on the northern side of the Potomac River, and it is demoralized, but he's basically saved Washington. It is amazing. Well, the Confederacy has 2 dice differential left to spend. They have 1 discretionary command point, and they're going to use that. And they will spend the discretionary command point and 1 point of dice differential, and they're going to activate 1 division that is currently in Fredericksburg. So we'll switch that over to 2 1s. And they're going to move that force 2 hexes north to reinforce the battered Army of Northern Virginia, moving that up to a strength of 7 again. Confederates have 1 point of dice differential remaining. They're going to spend that, and they're going to take a leader from the leader pool and place that directly into the Army of Northern Virginia to help stabilize it. They only have 1 leader in the pool, and that is a cavalry general. So we're going to place that unknown cavalry general into the Army of Northern Virginia. So that brings the round to a close. Both sides have used up their dice roll differential. There's still command points and reinforcements available for both sides, and the Union has quite a few leaders to bring in. The Union's command points are nearly gone. They just have 1 left in the Western District. They have several reinforcements to bring in, some in the Trans and some in the West. Confederates have 2 command points in the West, 1 in the Trans, and 1 Western reinforcement remaining. Well, this video is getting a little on the long side, so I think I'm going to end the video here. If this is something that the viewers are interested in, we can continue the playthrough. My main mission in this video was to, I guess, demonstrate a 43-year-old game and to show you just how well this game was designed. The storytelling that this game is able to deliver is just off the charts, and it's such a fun game to play. And I have to admit, when I was doing this playthrough for you to view, I feel like I was back 43 years ago when I first bought the game. It's amazing. I was immediately catapulted back to those wonderful times when Victory Games was active and you never knew what you were going to get from that fine game company. I'm glad I was able to demonstrate a few of the combats. There's a lot of stuff that we never got to. Naval amphibious invasions, naval combat, combined offensives, where you're using ground and naval forces in one operation. There's lots of stuff that this game includes that we didn't get to yet. But if there is interest in this, I'll be more than happy to continue the playthrough. I'm a little leery to keep going with this. If this is, it's a 43-year-old game. I don't know how many people would want to watch this. But like I said, I was basically just wanted to demonstrate what a fine game that this is. And I hope that this does get reprinted someday. There was some scuttlebutt that the designer and Compass Games were going to be working together to reproduce this. I don't know if that's true. I heard that about a year ago, and so I don't know if that's true or not, but I hope that that is true. This is such a great game that I think it needs to be brought into the 21st century. So a big thank you to everyone who watched, and I look forward to seeing you again in another video. And in the meantime, this is Keith from the Solo Gamers Club signing off and wishing everyone a pleasant evening and happy gaming. Good night.